I want.
What's up, everybody? It's Saturday morning fantasy Firebox time. As always, I'm your host, Tony Jigsaw Cutillo, and I always try to bring special people in. Today, I am joined by the K-Prop King, I like to call him, from SportsMemo.com, Mr. Mid-Major Matt Josephs. Matt, what's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Good morning. There's not a lot of people I would get up this early for, but for you, anytime.
I love it, man. I appreciate that. You know, when you're first starting out in a new company, they kind of give you the shaft and the low time. So you got to make out what you can, right? So work our way up. But listen, this is a great weekend, as always. It's a weekend before All-Star weekend, right? Before All-Star break. Got the Home Run Derby coming up, which I listen, if you can't get hyped up over watching Shohei Ohtani in that video and Barry Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr., no matter what you want to call about the steroid era, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it gets you pumped up, doesn't it, Matt?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it's not my favorite event of all time, but they've made such a good field this year that it's going to be intriguing. Oh, yeah, it's also in Coors Field, so there might be a couple of home runs in this one.
Exactly. Just a couple, man. A couple. Adam, what's up, buddy? As always, checking in. Trevor, man, you've been low and about, man. Well, welcome back. Sammy Sosa. I'm not talking about Sammy today. And one of my all-time favorites, Richie Sexton. All right, Trevor, I like it. I like where you're going. But like we're gonna do, as always, we'll break down some cores for the games coming up. Obviously, some pitchers we're looking to attack when it comes to DraftKings lineup and things of that nature. But then we're gonna talk a little home run derby. We'll look at the contestants, kind of give our not really our analysis, just our fun picks, who we think may look to take the crown in Coors Field. But today looks like a split. You got 6 games in the early slate. You got 6 games in the late slate. And I think when you look at this, Matt, the first thing I do, and I know you play a lot of DFS lineups, and man, did we miss, I want to think, we just missed the Brad Miller experiment the other night, didn't we?
Yeah, it's funny because you saw him in the lineup, but first off, you're like, wait a second, why is he in the lineup? McCutchen's hot and everything. And of course, he hits 3 homers. And he was one of those guys I looked at to kind of slot in because I had a little bit of money left and I just went in a different direction. And that was unfortunate because he, only hit 3 home runs. Man,
who would have thought? And I was trying to think. I know he was going for that 4th one too. And I the only guy I remember is Mark Whitten. I don't, they hit 4 home runs in the game. And I may be off, but I think he did it with the Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken. But do you remember anybody else that hit 4 in a game?
I do not. That's it's a rare thing nowadays. Yeah. Although with the live ball era, I'm sure it'll happen more. But yeah, especially in Wrigley, I don't think the wind was blowing out a little bit, but still, it's Brad Miller and almost 4 home runs.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It'd be like I think he was getting piss tested right into that game. Who knows? But you never know, man. Funny things has happened. I think Brad Miller was 3,700 that night too. And I was like back and forth. I thought I was going to put him in there. And then I went with Janikowski at like $2,000 and just to hope to get a little sleeper pick there. And it just didn't work out in my favor. So sometimes we're kings, man, and sometimes we're not. What are you going to do, right? So Adam says Garrett Cole 8-4. Listen, obviously, just Adam, Garrett Cole's on the mound, right?
Exactly.
It's there's a lot of good arms today on the mound. And we like to go, everybody knows me. I kind of like to go against the grain a little bit because it's very easy. if it's obvious, yes, you're going to put this guy in lineup, but you have to look at owner percentage. You have to look at what's going to separate you from the top. So I like to do different things every now and then. And I looked at the early game slate, and there's a lot of decent R's. Obviously, my man Lewis is at the top, but I went a little different direction. And I think, everybody does what they want and does different things, but I like the Rodgers and Stroman pair. That's what I'm looking at. Trevor Rodgers, multiple strikeout pitcher going up against Atlanta. I get it. It's going to be a tough. That lineup is very special. I understand, but even when he gives up runs, he still manages. I always call it my lucky 13 number, which is innings pitched plus strikeouts. I got to be above 13, and he usually hits that number on the regular. And Marcus Stroman, to me, Matt, is a guy who I don't think gets enough love just because of his strikeout potential. He's got a low ERA today, and the last 3 games haven't been great. 0.30. He hasn't really shown the K potential that we're used to, but before that, he's averaging 7 to 8 per game. So against the lowly Pirates, who do have some young players, they tend to swing and miss an awful lot. So I'm looking at an $8,100 number. I think this is a good value for a starting pitcher today in DFS.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm in show me mode with Stroman because I want to see him do it. And we've seen a different pitcher the last couple of times. I mean, to have no strikeouts in baseball nowadays is hard to do. The other thing is, people talk about Pittsburgh in terms of, how young they are and how awful they are, but they have the 26th highest K rate. I mean, they're 22.1% when it comes to K rate. So that's really good. They don't strike out as much as people think they do. So Stroman was a guy I had in my lineup, and then I thought about it and I took him out, and I actually went with both pitchers in that game between Rodgers and Fried. I mean, the Marlins are a strikeout waiting to happen. And I know, look, you never want to do that because there's a chance neither of them get the victory. And then there's a chance that you miss out on something like that. But the Marlins are striking out a ton. If you look at some of the guys that they've faced as of late, 11 of the last 14 starting pitchers have had at least 5 strikeouts or more against the Marlins. They're second highest against lefties. They're the highest the last 2 weeks, 28.3% K rate the last 2 weeks for the Marlins, and 25% K rate at home. So I like this opportunity to play both pitchers, Fried and Rodgers, and then I'll kind of slot around them when it comes to the hitting.
I like it. I mean, listen, I did the other night, I did Scherzer and Darvish, and it didn't work out because Darvish got lit up, right? But, I mean, what's the odds? But, listen, the whole thing is, and I think you agree with this, Matt, and I tell people all the time, I'm not really worrying about the win. That's not my biggest thing here. I mean, yeah, it's nice, but at the end of the day, I want the high strikeout rate, and I want the innings pitched because that's what's going to bump up your point total. And when you can get 2 guys, I mean, listen, Max Fried, listen, he's been back and forth too, but he's been really good as of late. Right. And I think that's what people look. The last 2 games, not that great. But if you look at it, before that, he's trending in the right 15 to 20 points per game when we talk about DraftKings. So I'm not opposed to that at all. I'm really not. And the salaries are still up. Right. I mean, you're talking you're going to spend 17-1 on 2 pitchers if you do Max Fried and Trevor Rodgers. If you go with me, do Stroman and Rodgers, you're looking at 16-7. So still a nice chunk of change compared. Savings compared to Gelato up at the top at 10-3 because sometimes I like to pay out for pitching, Matt, but sometimes I like to leave myself a little money as well.
Well, and it also depends on if you pay up, then maybe you can pay down for somebody else. I mean, yesterday there was some gold mine people towards the bottom of the pitchers. I almost thought that they were drunk making the salaries yesterday because I saw Taylor Widener was number 1 at some point yesterday when I was setting my lineup. But I mean, sometimes if you want to pay up for one of these stars that are going to do really well, and you could find a guy towards the bottom that you could pair off, then yeah, of course you want to try and keep it around that 17, around 17, maybe 18 at the most when it comes to a DraftKings lineup.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, and that's what you have to. You got to look at the values. I mean, I tell people this all the time. There are some really hidden values inside these lineups that if you're not careful, you're going to miss them. I mean, break the pitchers down, break the batters down. Look at what they've done over the last 5, 10, 2, 3, doesn't matter, and look at what they put their value at. Because sometimes, like I tell people all the time, it's interesting because you'll look at players and they'll have like 2 or 3 good games. They start off at 4,500. They give you double-digit point totals, and all of a sudden they drop them down to 41. And you have to start to think, why? Like, what is that? Is that like, because that's enticing me? I got to throw in my lineup. Is it because of the pitching matchup? Is it because of where he's at in the lineup? So many different things, but I like to pounce on that. But I also don't like to chase points either. And I tell people that all the time, where a guy has one good game and he goes up $800, and I'm like, wait a minute, I need, like you said with Stroman, I need to see more, right? So I think that's what you have to be careful of as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's one of those things where you want to make sure you pay attention to the prices. You want to make sure to pay attention to the scoring structure, because everybody's a little bit different. Some people may value some things a little bit more. So you certainly, those are the two things you want to pay attention to on a day-to-day basis when you're doing this stuff.
That's what makes DFS so great. I've told everybody that all the time. I was a huge season-long proponent. Oh, no way will I do DFS. Can't do it. I like to keep my guys as a GM and formulate my entire team for the whole year. But I'll tell you what, DFS is so much fun because the values go up and down. The players come in and out, and there's so many different changes you can get. And I'll tell you what, if you're a beginner, I will say this before I get into the core. If you're a beginner just starting out, there's no better way to learn the game than to play DFS, because you're going to learn about players you never knew existed. You're going to learn about statistics you never even knew that were multiplicated. You're going to learn so much by playing DFS. It's where I've got a lot of knowledge from football and turning it into the baseball realm and basketball. I mean, me and you were going back at basketball, man. I think basketball, what would you say between NFL, Major League, and NBA, the hardest DFS game to play? I think it's basketball. I don't know about you.
I think it's baseball, because, I mean, as I said, like yesterday, I had a really great lineup. I had a ton of studs because I was able to save so much on pitchers, and none of them hit yesterday. And that's the problem. I feel like I know what I'm going to get from the Derrick Henrys in football. I feel like I know what I'm going to get from the Giannis's, the Lucas. But in baseball, you just never know when your stars are going to go 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts.
That is true. That is true. There's huge letdown potential in Major League Baseball. That and I say that all the time with the 0 for 4 kind of night. And I'm like, that's what you have to be really careful of. That's why when I build my cores, I don't like to take all power guys. And I've said that before, because power guys are most likely to give you that 0 for night, right? Because they're not a 5-tool kind of guy. They're not hitting the ball at all different angles. They're just looking at launch angle, looking to get it out of the park. So I try to mix it up. And that's specifically why, because I don't want to get screwed with zeros. And it happens all the time. So that's why. So my early core in the first 6 games, I don't think there's been a hotter player than Joey Gallo, besides Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, he's in a class of himself, but Joey Gallo has been unbelievable over the past 10 to 13 games. I really like him. I call him Joey Gallo days. I've said that before, because he's a power hitter, pure power hitter, right? In Cincinnati, they had a guy named Adam Dunn who would just hit 40 home runs but strike out 250 times and hit 198. And I kind of used to make Joey Gallo into that same directive right there, because it was all or nothing with Joey. But he's been more consistent as of late. So I really like it. And then Matt Olson, another great bat, another great story. Oakland just breeds players. I swear. I don't know what it is, but I want the Billy Bean theory on how to build a franchise, because no matter who it is they bring up through that farm system, Matt, these guys just produce, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know how it is. I mean, obviously we saw Moneyball, so we saw a little bit of it. But yeah, these guys, it's funny. That's why I hate betting on Oakland games, because they get in these stretches where they can hit a ton and then they can't hit a ton. And it's like, you remember, oh, they don't have any superstars. And then there's times when they're scoring 6, 7, 8 runs a game. And you're like, oh, yeah, but they're all kind of good when they're all, hitting the ball.
Exactly. The one thing I like about Olsen, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Number one, I like the matchup against Fultonvich. So he screwed me a little bit in the past. I thought he was going to get hit against. He's thrown like a gem. Mike Minor did that to me a few times, but the odds are stacked against it, right? So I like Matt Olson. One thing I like about Matt is I look at his last 5 games, and there's no zeros. Even though Matt is a power hitter, he's hitting 283. So he's got that average up above where power hitter potential usually is. So at least I know I'm going to get something from Matt, whether he gets an RBI, whether he gets a couple walks, a double, a couple hits. He's got 2 multi-hit games over the last 10. So I'm looking at least, I know I'm paying $5,700, but I know I'm not getting a zero today from my man Matt. So that's kind of was my theory going into this core. The other theory is, Matt Moore pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? Listen, I mean, we came in this year with Chase Anderson and Matt Moore, and I think we kind of knew what to expect here. I think we were kidding ourselves and we thought these guys were going to be major league pitchers and, even at the back end of a bullpen or a rotation, but today, Matt Moore goes up against one of the surging offensive teams in Major League Baseball, the Boston Red Sox. And I said this last night, Matt. One guy, I'm going to get your opinion on this because I know you look at a ton of stats, and I got to give my hats off to JD Martinez. And the reason why is because I did not think he was worth that money when he got signed from Boston. I was like, there's no way they're paying him this huge contract. I don't think he's going to produce coming from Detroit. I just didn't think that was going to be possible. And he's been their best offensive player this year, next to Devers. But I'm just shocked that he's been able to be so consistent behind the plate. I don't know about you, but that's just my feeling.
I mean, I took the under in his home runs. I thought last year was kind of what happens with him. And, he wasn't as much of a home run guy. And it was like 34 and a half, 35 and a half, whatever it is. And he's kind of had a really good first half. But yeah, he probably didn't seem like worth it. But then again, I don't think a lot of these players are worth the money they're getting. Case in point, Bryce Harper. So, the contract doesn't look very good, but he's certainly performing in Fenway right now.
And batting 303. I think that's one of the most surprising things. He's batting over 300. I mean, I just, it's crazy, man. Like what he's been able to do. And he's 33. He's not old by any sense, but he's getting to that, that after prime kind of age that's between like 27 and 32. So he's getting to that next element. But obviously, best thing about being in the American League, you get just DH, which is obviously what he mainly does. So the one thing I like about it is he's on a team that gives him a ton of protection. Because they have so many good bats on that team. And Rafael Devers, Rafi's been unbelievable. Another great guy, which is why he's in my core today. I went Devers over Martinez just specifically because I just think it's a Rafi day. Sometimes you got to pick a guy, right? And I know Martinez had a really good game yesterday, but I'm going to pick Devers today. And Juan Soto, who I know I got killed for this at the beginning of the year. Everybody said, who's the best player in fantasy for baseball? And I know everybody was on Fernando Tatis. But for me, I took Soto. I know everybody, it was between Acuna, Soto and Tatis. And everybody was Acuna and Tatis. And I said Juan Soto. And I know, listen, Juan started off extremely slow. I get it. And I know I had a lot of people hit me up like, oh, what happened to that Juan Soto pick? Listen, I am not going to hide on my man Juan because I still think, he's expected to do so much on that Washington team, which is a little different than what Tatis has, right? Obviously, and Acuna are in much better lineups. But I think Soto just has all the tools to be able to be that stud. And I think he's starting to show that. Over the last 3 double-digit point totals, 14 plus in the middle against San Diego, which were tremendous games. And I think today against DeSclafani, I think this is another good day for Juan Soto. What do you think, Matt?
I'm a little disappointed yesterday. Had the Nats team total over. He had a couple of key strikeouts with runners on base with it, which was a little disappointing. That team, I don't necessarily love targeting people in San Francisco. Spacious ballpark. Rarely does the weather help you that much. But I could see it. Josh Bell has really good numbers against DeSclafani, but Josh Bell is a strikeout waiting to happen. So you're either waiting for the home run or he's going to strike out 4 times. So that's kind of the issue with Josh Bell, who has seen him obviously when he was with the Pirates. He saw DeSclafani a lot when he was with the Reds.
That's true. That is true. And you bring up a good point about the ballpark, which is another reason why I actually like Soto, because that ballpark is so huge from left center and right center that you have a speedy guy, you can get the ball in that gap. He turns a double into a triple and possibly inside the park home run with ease. So, I think that's why, I veered towards the Soto experiment. You're right. Did strike out twice yesterday. And that was the problem beginning of the year. He was striking out a lot more than we were used to seeing with him. I don't know if he was trying too hard. We see that with young guys a lot, right? They try too much. And again, that line, you mentioned Josh Bell. He is your prototypical do or die batter, right? I mean, it's like home run or nothing. And with Josh Bell, I don't think you can expect anything else. But I think Juan just came into this year saying, I need to carry this team. And I just think he put a lot of pressure on himself. And I think finally it's starting to come down a little bit. And, I think he's finally starting to produce like he has. I think it was 3 out of the last 5. He's been in double-digit points. So I'm hoping today is kind of the thing. And Joey Gallo, again, again, I got to go back to Joey Gallo because, and I know we're going to talk about him in a home run derby, but Joey Gallo has just really, really turned it on. He really has. And I know, when I first start repping up Joey Gallo this year, he literally was at 3,700 on DraftKings. It was to me was an absolute steal. But then he slowly started to build up. Now he's at 5,100. As of today, 5,100. And I know it's a big number. I get it. I understand. But if you look at what he's been able to do over like the past 10 to 15 games, it's been absolutely unbelievable from a batter standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, I should say, because he's not a guy that you were building your team around. And that's why I say this. He was a guy that was not like an afterthought, but he was like, all right, he's not consistent. We can pick our spots with Joey Gallo, but I don't know, Matt. For me, Joey's been a guy that's been consistently in my lineup over the last couple of weeks.
He's 3 for 5 with 2 homers against Caprillion. That's good for me.
Yeah.
I'm a big guy, and for people who don't follow me on Twitter, at noon I post MLB histories and guys that do well against each other. And Gallo's name is on the list, and certainly, obviously, it's only 5 at bats. But I mean, Caprillion's barely been in the league. But when you see 3 for 5 with 2 homers, that means you probably want to do it. And his price is very good for the slate in the afternoon.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's a good point. If you're not following, join as always at mid major Matt. Listen, mid major Matt, get it right, get it on Twitter. I mean, the historical research that he does, and I think people don't understand that. And I'm not trying to prop you up just because you're on the show with me, Matt. But I look at a lot of stuff that you put from your K props to your research because, listen, that's what goes into formulating these lines. It's not just pick and pluck. I like that guy. Let me throw him in there. You have to do the historical about this. And that's something that you do, and you do brilliantly. And nobody else that I follow does that. So I applaud you for that. And you helped me out a ton. So I will tell you that.
Yeah, because it's good, especially for prop play. I love playing props. Sometimes there's just not value in sides and totals in Major League Baseball. There's more in props, whether it's K props or the total bases or whatever. And as you said, you got to do the research. And guys who have good histories against pitchers have good histories for a reason. And certainly, you have to know who those people are.
I love the K props, man. Between you, I would say you and Ariel got me all hooked up on these K props. I was never a K prop guy, and I was like, you guys got me all into this K prop market. It gives me another added element to my nightly updates. Watching MLB Live, watching the tie. I love it. It just gives me another element. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and with the way baseball is nowadays, everybody's striking out. So that's what it seems like. That's where it is. And sometimes you got to take some unders. You hold your nose. You hope that they hit, but you got to take some unders as well. There's always some value there.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, and that's what makes it fun. And it's one thing about betting on baseball, betting on sports in general. I know there's a lot of opposition out there. You still get the people that say, "Oh, it takes away from the game. You're not really watching the game," and I always push back on that because you are. I mean, if you look at the statistics and the research that you yourself do, that's becoming, a historian of the professional game, not just from a betting perspective, from an analytical perspective. And I don't think people understand that. There's numbers that you pull out and that I research that I'm like, I would never know this about this specific player. So it makes us all more educationally smarter. And I think people, they lose sight of that a lot.
Yeah, especially in a sport like this, which needs all the eyeballs it can get. I mean, if you're going to get people playing fantasy baseball, DFS, betting on it, and it's going to make people watch, that's going to be even better.
Oh, 100%. And we know Major League Baseball has a problem getting people to watch. So they need as much help as they can get. That's for damn sure. But let's get into some early value. This is my favorite. And I love the value plays. I really do. And again, just looking at guys that are under like a $4,000 level that I think that I look at why is their value so low today? And what are they doing? And one guy who I understand, big money guy, Francisco Lindor. I get it. From a Mets perspective, I know people aren't happy. He didn't really produce right in the beginning. But you know what, Matt? He's actually been really turning it on, and he has. And you still got to pick your spots, right? You still got to pick your spots. And today against Anderson, to me, at 3,800, I think his value is extremely very low, I should say. It's not spot on for me. I think they get him at under 4,000. against a really good matchup against Anderson, against the Pirates. I think this is something I'm pouncing on. I am. Now, I always look at the 5 games. I tell everybody that. I look at the 5 games. And what I do is I'm looking at his last 3 where he's been very productive. And I know, listen, he's got hits in all 3 games, and that was one of the biggest things. But people have to remember, Francisco Lindor did everything. Right? He did everything in Cleveland, and they're waiting for him to do everything here with the Mets. So the average will come up, the home runs will come up, the RBIs will come up, the run score will come up, right? So I like today, I'm going all in on Lindor at 3,800. I don't know what you think, Matt.
I enjoy Lindor for my K props. I mean, he's one of the guys. I mean, I had Brewbaker's over yesterday. He gave me a strikeout there from on Brewbaker. It's the one bad thing about DraftKings is the lack of a utility, because I put Didi in as my shortstop. Didi's 4 of 11 with 3 homers against Martin Perez. Didi's been hit swinging a little bit of a hot bat. Now, of course, if Didi's not in the lineup, I'll probably pivot to Lindor. But to me, I much rather have a guy like Didi in that ballpark in a game that could be 12-8. 12-6, who knows? But as many pieces in that game as I could possibly get. Lindor comes to second for me behind Didi.
I like it. I like the Didi pick. I do. And obviously, because in that short porch in Fenway, right, in right field, left-handed batter, and he's been there, right? It's Didi had played in that park for how many years on the opposing end, right, with the Yankees. So obviously he knows how to hit. He knows the right spot. So I like that a lot. And another guy, I know we talked about the Pittsburgh Pirates earlier, is Brian Hayes today. Now, again, when you look at it, I know he's going against Stroman, and I'm picking Stroman as one of my pitchers, but Stroman also likes to leave some beach balls over the plate every now and then. And Brian Hayes, under 4,000 to me at 3,700. I mean, I'm looking at, Matt, the last 4 games, no matter what, I'm strictly looking at fantasy points at 100% here, that I'm looking at a guy who's literally given me 50 points, right under 50 points in 4 games. And you're dropping his number to 3,700. He's a special player. He's a young player. He's got power. He's got speed. I just think today is one of those days where you could pluck him in, like we talked about. You put your core in, you put your aces in, then you look at how can I spread my money out. I think today Brian Hayes could really bang on that $3,700 number.
Yeah, and certainly, and he's the little bit of volatility there, but you expect that in a younger player. And the guy I chose at third base, I mean, I know it's going to sound like a broken record. I went with Alec Boehm here, and Alec Boehm coming off a solid game, 3,300 here for Alec Boehm against a pitcher that I don't mind going up against in Martin Perez. And Boehm, when he's hot, he starts stringing the hits and the RBIs together. And we know, as guys who watch the Phillies, that when the lineup is going, the opportunities are there for almost everybody. So I like your guy. I went a little cheaper with Alec Boehm just because I think that, Perez is a guy I want to attack, and Boehm coming off a good game yesterday, I think he could string another one together.
I like that. Boehm is, the only thing that's been, disappointing, obviously, I think we all know, is the power from Alex Boehm. I think we were expecting more power, especially when you talk about the hot corner. Usually in Major League Baseball, your third baseman is one of your premier power hitters. So, but I think, you, Matt, as well as a lot of people know, I don't think he's a future third baseman. I think he's more trending into a first base kind of realm. So we'll see how that works, because I know there's a lot of stuff with the trade deadline coming up. And would you trade Alec Boehm to get a guy like Chris Bryant, maybe Craig Kimbrell? Does that change your team? Who knows what's going to happen, because Dombrowski is a wild card. Dombrowski has done a lot of extraordinary things over the years, especially with the Boston Red Sox. Trading away a lot of talent for a lot of established talent. So we'll see what he does. But I do like Boehm. He was one of my favorite players. The one thing I'll point out is just 40 RBIs. So even though his power potential isn't there, 40 RBIs is nothing to sneeze at in the first half of the season. So he is getting the job done at specific times. Yesterday, had to get 2 games out of the last 5. He's double digits. I mean, he gave you a 25 in Wrigley's, gave you 13 yesterday in Boston. And you talk about, but Perez, I'm not a big Perez believer. So I think it's a really good pick. But let's look at the other player on that team who I'm taking in Andrew McCutchen, who has been reborn over the last couple weeks, which I love to see, because Andrew McCutchen is a great, number one, he's a great person. He's a great player, great clubhouse presence, very savvy veteran. Hated to see him, no matter if you want to blame Segura, whatever you want to do because of the mental lapse, but just a terrible injury for McCutchen a couple years ago, comes back. And right now, Matt, I don't know if there's another player on the Phillies that's hotter than Andrew McCutchen. At the 3,300, for that number, he's definitely going to be one of my outfielders today.
Yeah, and he also has good numbers against Perez in his career. Now, granted, none of them came up with home runs, but I mean, he's another guy who's seen Perez a lot, obviously being a veteran in this league. And at 3,300, you're not going to find a lot of good outfielders down that low when you're certainly looking at these lineups. And when you put a 3,300 outfielder in there, you could put another 5,000 outfielder in there as well, or whatever, 5,000, whatever. And it's kind of like that give and take relationship here. Find a cheap guy, add a really good guy. And that's what McCutch is.
I like that. Find a cheap guy, add a really good guy, because it's so true. I mean, it's what we talk about all the time. I always talk about numbers and how you have the numbers left over, what it allows you to do. Because if you can find, I mean, Gavin Sheets over like a week ago when he was at 2,000 was like, that's huge, because I just saved myself $2,000. So now that $3,500 guy turns into a $5,500 guy, and I can throw another bomber in my core. So it works out great. It really does. Now, I like to do sleepers. And my early game sleeper here, if he plays, is from Boston, is Marwin Gonzalez, because he plays multiple positions. Again, cheap. These are cheap sleepers. And I look at, again, Matt Moore on the mound. I look at this and I say, you know what? This could be a spot where I can see Marwin Gonzalez get about 2 to 3 hits in this game, maybe knocking an RBI. And if you're paying 2,700 and he's going to give you double-digit points, I mean, listen, that could be the difference. I say all the time, from finishing maybe 5th in your DraftKings squad to 2nd or 1st, because the ownership is going to be low and you're going to get double-digit points from somebody like this. So I had Miggy Cabrera the other day, help me out. I'm going to go today with Marwin Gonzalez as a nice sleeper.
I like it. I mean, obviously, Matt Moore's not very good. He's probably going to give you 1 or 2 turns through the lineup, and then that bullpen comes in, and certainly we know how much of a gas can that bullpen is. So I could see it. I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup. We'll certainly see, and then you'll pivot to somebody else, probably in that Boston lineup instead. When it comes to, as I said, I think this could be a 12-6 type of game today.
Yeah, I definitely could see a lot of runs scored in this game for sure. I don't think we have to worry about that at all. It's going to be what side are we on, right? What side are we on? Now, my fun part here before we get, and we'll pick this up a little bit because we've got about 15 minutes left. My FFVP, which if everybody don't know, it's my fantasy Firebox value play today. I like what I do is, this is easy to me and this is fun. It's a baseline of 7 to 10 points. This is what I base it on. 7 to 10 fantasy points. A guy that's under 3,000, specifically usually between like 2,100 and 2,700, that I think you can plug in last minute in your lineup and get positive point production. And we've been really good. And the best thing about these FFVPs is the guys that we have mentioned and we've played have not only set us apart from the rest on that specific day, but now you can't get them as FFVPs because now they're $4,000. We guys like Jake Fraley. When we picked Jake Fraley at 2,200, now you can't get Jake Fraley barely under 3,800, right? So you're seeing him outperform what his base was. Eric Haas was another guy. Look at Eric Haas now, 4,000 plus. We had him at 2,300. So today I'm going to go with a couple guys. Number one, not to play on his name, but Jake Berger from the Chicago White Sox. Number one, I love the name, 100%. It reminds me of an old video Burger Time game that I used to play as a kid with my next door neighbor. But when I look at these guys, Matt, the thing that I pick them out, I look at number one, a decent pitching matchup. I'm not worried about Eshelman from Baltimore. I think he can be hit around a little bit. And again, preface by saying that this is a guy who's just started to play regularly, right? He's come up. He's batting .333, doesn't have a ton of appearances, right? But he's $2,700. And then when I look at this, I look at three out of the past 5 games, he's been in positive production. 2 games, he's been double digits. So I'm actually, again, this is a flyer. I'm taking a flyer on a guy. And Jake Berger against a good pitching lineup. I mean, a good pitching matchup, a low undervalue spot, and a guy that could actually give you low ownership and big value. And the other guy I'm looking at is on the other end, okay, at 2,300 for Anthony Santander from the Baltimore Orioles. And I know he's going up against Giolito. I understand that. But when I look at these guys, Matt, I look at a number at 2,300. And number one, it's not going to kill you. So it's one of those things that, yeah, you know what? If he gets a 0, it's not going to kill you. But when you're doing your lineups, and you want to put those big bats in there, like we alluded to earlier. A guy like 2,300 for Anthony Santander. I mean, listen, 2 games. Okay, his last 5, 16, 0, 15, 5. He plays in a decent lineup. Cedric Mullins has been unbelievable, by the way. Mountcastle's been really good. So now you have Santander that sits there and can give you decent production for 2,300. So they're my FFVPs for today. What do you think, Matt?
I like it. I mean, obviously, you want to get as many pieces of the White Sox as possible. I mean, I have Sheets in my lineup for today as a guy, and I like Goodwin too. He's another guy that
he's been really good.
He's been really good for them, and you certainly want to get any sort of pieces, especially against a guy like Eshelman. You know, the Orioles are going to give up runs in this game, so to me, any chance to get, and I like the Orioles lineup. It's been underperforming at points, but Giolito can be hit. It's a road game. If the conditions are right in Camden Yards, you might see plenty of runs there too. So I don't hate either of those guys.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of value. And I know Giolito is an unbelievable pitcher. Obviously, I get it, right? He's the top pitcher on the slate today. Right? We understand his potential, but there's a ton of value in the Baltimore lineup. It's not like Giolito cannot be hit. And that's what I think people are misguided here. You know, and again, when you're talking fantasy, it's not just about, I got to get this guy, you know, this pitcher's going to kill everybody. Not necessarily. I mean, you have to look at his ERA is 4.20. It's not like he doesn't give up any runs. He is over the last 5. I'll just tell you, over the last 2, he's given up 9 runs, 16 hits. Right, so this guy's been hit around a little bit, even though he's been really good this year, you know, in certain spots. He's only got a 500 record. So, you know, the biggest thing with Giolito is his strikeout potential. Now, he's only had 6 strikeouts in the last 2 games against 2 mediocre teams at Detroit and Minnesota. So it's not like he's setting the world on fire. So, man, I'm looking at this real fast, and I'm looking at this Baltimore lineup, and I'm saying to myself, you know, specifically from a value standpoint, I mean, Cedric Mullins is only 3,400, which I'll tell you, I think it's a really good play there if you're talking about value. Mountcastle, we talked about, only 3,300. And Austin Hayes as an outfield spot for 3,000, I think is a really good value too. I mean, Austin Hayes has been pretty productive over the past 10. So I think there's some value on that Baltimore squad today.
Yeah, certainly. The problem is also there's a lot of strikeouts, and that's why people like to target. I mean, Mountcastle, I think, is at like a 30% K rate, so that's a bit of an issue when you go up against a guy like Giolito, who had double-digit strikeouts against the Orioles earlier this season.
That is true. That is true. So again, you know, you take everything in consideration. You take the high strikeout rate, you take the low number, and you figure, okay, I say this all the time. If you build your core right and you take your aces the right time, these guys can only help you and not hurt you. So as long as those guys produce, you should be good to go. Now let's hit on real fast. I want to hit on the late game, because the late game, the reason why I don't spend a lot of time in the late games is because it could change so much. 7 p.m. first pitch. I mean, we're talking about 10 a.m. here on the East Coast. So much can change, you know, by the time. But I'll tell you what, late aces for me, obviously, is Walker Buehler. I think that's a no-brainer, in my opinion. I'm going to get Matt's opinion in a second. But I like a sleeper pitcher here. Okay, I like Hyun Kim from the Cardinals. And I like him because, number one, he's going up against a Cubs team that really is reeling. They basically, they waved the white flag already. They've already given up. They're basically like, look, what players do you want? We're in selling mode right now. And I'm looking at, number one, I'm looking at, you go into Wrigley Field on a Saturday night. This, you know, Hyun Kim at 5,700 for the Cardinals. The last 2 games, he's averaging 20-plus fantasy points. And just 2 games ago, his number was 9,600. DraftKings has no idea what to do with this cat, okay? No idea. He had literally 7,600, 9,600, this 6,300, and now he's 5,700. So they're all over the map. And I think if you can hit on Hyun Kim at 5,700, just imagine, Matt, that the opportunities that's going to open up for your core.
Yeah, certainly. My one problem with him is he doesn't strike out a ton of guys now. The Cubs K rate the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months has been really high. So maybe he walks into a couple of them. You know, I think that's not a bad, especially at 5,700. You're seeing guys who are like the bullpen guys at that sort of price. I actually think so. I went with Peralta. of course.
Nice.
I mean, he strikes out a ton of
Yep.
guys. And I actually like Caleb Smith today. And I know it's you sweat a little bit because you're going up against the Dodgers. But if you look at his history this year against the Dodgers, he's pitched pretty well against them. You might get 5 or 6 innings. The Dodgers are actually striking out a lot more as of late. We know how they do against lefties. I know he's not going to get the win, but as we talked about, you don't necessarily need the win if you're going to get innings and strikeouts. And I think Caleb Smith could be a guy that's going to get you both of those. So I know a lot of people are going to skip over him because he's going against the Dodgers, but Caleb Smith could definitely be worth a look against the LA lineup that struggles against lefties. He does strike out batters, and he goes and gives a little bit of length here to an Arizona team that's not very good.
I actually agree with that. I do. I did take a couple Dodgers in one of my lineups, specifically because, Caleb Smith, if you look at it from the outside, he's given up 8 earned runs in his last 3 games, and he hasn't struck out a ton. He's got a decent strikeout rate, but he's given up 3 home runs in the past. So I'm looking at, like, from a Mookie Betts potential, that to actually excel, but the last time he faced the Dodgers, Matt, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, he went 6 innings, only gave up 1 hit, lost a game, only gave up 1 hit, struck out 5, and he gave you 21 points, for your DraftKings lineup at 6,500. So I don't think he's a bad play at all. I think a lot of people, they like you said, they get scared because, it's the Dodgers, never start. But again, you said the perfect eloquy, and you don't need to win. Right? You don't need to win. And that's why I've come out with my own jigsaw theory of my lucky number 13 is because as long as I'm getting, innings pitched plus strikeouts that give me, 13 plus, I know I'm going good because then I'm going to get all the little additives that's mixed in and hopefully get, an extra plus 7 without a win. So I do like the Caleb Smith pick because you can't, it's so hard, Matt, to just say, give me Garrett Cole and Walker Buehler. Give me, Peralta and Garrett Cole or Peralta and Walker Buehler. I mean, you're spending like almost $20,000 on 2 arms. You really have to separate the two a little bit.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to get 2 aces in your lineup unless you're really savvy enough to go and get a whole bunch of $3,000 hitters, and even then, you need your aces to be spot on because most likely, unless you hit 1 or 2 of those $3,000 fielders, your lineup's going to struggle a little bit. You need more balance as opposed to being top heavy. You're needing a whole lot more balance. I feel like in your lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree. 100%. So let's get to I'll give you the late core of what I'm thinking here. And I know, listen, the Goldschmidt thing to me, I had him a couple weeks ago on my core. He didn't absolutely produce, but yeah, I get these feelings, and I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes I get gut feelings, and I look at what these players have been able to do over the past few games. And I look at Zach Davies, who I'm not worried about from a Chicago Cubs standpoint. I look at Wrigley Field, depending on what the wind is, depending on how the ball goes out. Paul Goldschmidt has had plenty of games in Wrigley Field. He knows how to play in there. But what I'm looking at is his numbers overall over the past 6-7 games, just from a fantasy perspective. He struck out 4 times in 5. You come to expect that. He is a power hitter. But his salary of $4,700, I'm looking at 31 points in 3 games. That's a 10-plus point average. If you can get 10-plus points for $4,700 out of one of the players in your core, I think you're doing good. And I don't think it's out of the realm. He hasn't gone long in the past 6 or 7 games. He's due for it. He's had 2 multi-hit games over the past 3, which is, kind of unlike Paul Goldschmidt. He's usually 1 hit per game. It's either home run or maybe single and an RBI. But I like Goldschmidt tonight. I like Mookie Betts, who we talked about specifically because even though Caleb Smith is a decent matchup, I think he can hit around. I like them at home. And Ohtani just speaks for himself. Matt, let me say Ohtani. And you seen a video earlier that I posted. Yeah, Barry Bonds there, who at no matter what you think of Barry Bonds, it was must-see TV. When Barry Bonds was up, we wanted to see Barry Bonds. I don't think there's been another player since Barry Bonds that give this much potentially, exposure on a national level than Shohei Ohtani. What he's doing has just been remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to do what he's doing for a team that's not going to probably make the playoffs, that's also pretty big. I mean, usually you want these guys on teams that are going to make the playoffs, that are going to be on the airwaves. It's funny. When's the last time the Angels have been on Sunday Night Baseball? It feels like that baseball should be doing a better job of marketing the Angels than they do. But he's doing a good job himself. You hit a home run like you do last night, you're going to get on a lot of sports centers and places like that.
Yeah, I mean, he has been exceptional, and they've been doing this. No Mike Trout, right? I mean, Mike Trout been injured the whole year. I mean, that's what's killing him. It's just crazy. Oh, check this out. I don't know if this is right. So our man Adam checking it says Ohtani never does batting practice either. That's interesting. I did not know that. I did not know that, Adam. So I'm going to look that up. That's very interesting. I like that. I like that because I mean, listen, we already knew what to expect from him from, an international level, but that doesn't always formulate inside of the game. But I mean, he just looks locked in. Some guys, you could see, but his swing never wavers. It never changes. And I just hope that when it comes to the home run derby, he's like, I'm one of those guys that changes his swing. And then in the second half of the year, he can't get it back. And then he goes in and only hits 10 home runs in the second half and it's all for naught. But, we'll see what happens. But it's been a great story right now.
By the way, Ohtani doesn't take batting practice on the field. He does it underneath in the cages and stuff. So he does do batting practice. He just doesn't do it for everybody in the public.
Check that out. So he just doesn't want to be seen. I like that. I like to say these are the little quirks that, listen, man, that's what works. He's probably been doing that forever. Maybe he doesn't want all the press, right? You never know. He's not used to the American game right now, but I mean, listen, man, it's working. So whatever works, keep doing it for Shohei Ohtani. Now, late value real fast. I tell you what, man, I hope everybody listens on Sundays. And the reason why I say that is because on Sundays I call it Sunday value risers, right? So I do a value riser segment where I pick about 3 or 4 guys that I look at that have started to rise up the level that you can look at for the following week. And one of those guys was AJ Pollock. And AJ Pollock, people forget when he was with Arizona, he was a 5-tool guy. He was a guy that he was like the poor man's Christian Yelich, in my opinion, before he got hurt. And then before he went to the Dodgers and didn't play. Now he's starting to really produce. And Matt, his value to me is extremely low, and he can do so much for you, in your lineup. So that's one guy. I don't know how you feel about him, because I know you have so much research. You always have a ton of research on these guys. But AJ Pollock, he was literally, if you look at what he was costing, from 2,900, 3,000, and he was getting double-digit production out of those numbers. And over the last 2, I mean, he's giving you 42 points in 2 games, and he's still only 3,500, Matt. So again, against Caleb Smith, I think this is a good matchup. He can be hit up against, and he does so much, man. So AJ Pollock to me. I know, listen, for everybody out there, disclaimer, he can have a 2 or 3 strikeout game from time to time. I know Matt's going to say that, but I'm just looking at overall his last 2 games at 3,500. I think he can produce.
He can. He certainly could produce. The worry is that the Dodgers aren't as good against lefties. That's something. And of course, if I put Caleb Smith in my lineup, while I do want some Dodgers in there, I don't want to overexpose myself. And if I am going to play some Dodgers, it would be the guys that I know would produce: Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, the guys like that. So that's just the one thing, at least I'm worried about, because I have Caleb Smith in my lineup, is overexposing myself with Dodgers that may or may not do well against Smith.
I always think it's like a mind game too. So like you put that ace in there and then you start formulating your lineup. You're like, do I really want guys against the guy I have start? Like, it's like such an oxymoron a little bit. It plays with your mind a little bit. Like it really makes you think. But now you're right. I love it. And another guy I'm looking at, again, these are just value plays. I'm not telling everybody. I want to preface this by saying these guys aren't all in my lineup, right? And most of us play multiple lineups. So these are pick and pluck value guys that I like, that I think that you get 1, maybe 2 of these guys, excuse me, in your lineup. I think you could really do some damage. Gleyber Torres, to me, at 3,100, is in a really good spot today. Zach Greinke can be hit. He can be hit a lot. This isn't the Zach Greinke of 5 years ago, okay? So even though he still has good stuff and he pitches for a good team, he can be smacked around, Matt. So, when I'm building these lineups, I'm not saying to go all in on Aaron Judge or anything like that, but lower down the lineup, Gleyber Torres, 3,100. I look at him and say, you know what? I could see a multi-hit game today against Zach Greinke, a guy who's given up a ton of hits over the last week or so, or week of pitching, I should say, with 5 or 6 starts. And for 3,100, I think he could separate you from maybe one of your tiers, depending on how you build your team.
Yeah, I like it. He's in my lineup right now as we speak. One of the guys I like is I like Tucker Barnhart. At times I struggle with the
Yes.
catcher. Barnhart's 3,200. He's got a really good history against Peralta. Now, of course, it is Peralta. The strikeouts do come into play. But if you look at Barnhart's last couple of games here, he's getting hits. He's got 7, 8, 5, and 10 his last four appearances. That's kind of what you like from a catcher position, that if you don't like the studs, you're supposed to look for somebody down the middle or the bottom. And I think Tucker Barnhart's worth a look. He's hitting 268 on the season, so we know he can get some hits, and the history against Peralta certainly is a help.
I like Tucker Barnhart. You mentioned the catcher position because, the catcher position sometimes kind of like a throwaway position, right? You're like, unless you're really paying up. I don't normally pay up for a catcher. I know in the beginning a lot of people were on the Will Smith wagon, and it was like, all right, do I pay $4,500 for a catcher? And it's so hard for me to do. So I like, just like you said, I like finding those secret values. I know. A couple days ago, before Diaz's value started shooting off for Colorado, he was in that same kind of token. I've had a few guys that have been very low that we put in, but one of the guys I'm talking about is Luis Torrens, the Torrens from the Mariners. So if you look at Torrens, is another guy, another catcher. He's 3,400. I looked at him today, and I'm specifically looking at what he's done over the past 5 or 6 games. All right, so he has absolutely been crushing the baseball, not home run wise. Okay, he has 2 home runs out of the last 5, but he's been hitting the ball and he's been walking a ton. You don't normally get catchers that walk. And I think that's one of the stats that people, undervalue. And the only reason why I say that is because if you're going to pay $2,500, Matt, for a catcher, and it's like, okay, you know what? If he gets me a hit, great, gives me 3 or 4 points. If you get a guy who could walk at least once a game as a catcher and give you a hit and maybe an RBI, you're talking about now double-digit points for a guy that you spent under $2,500 for, which is a huge separation when you're building your DFS lineup. So I like Torrens today. I don't know if how much you think about him from a Seattle standpoint, but for 3,400, I think he's good value at the catcher position.
Yeah, usually I stay away from Mariners as much as possible for the most part. I mean, the other guy I usually play sometimes when only because I know he's capable is the Higashioka for the Yankees. I know he doesn't start and he doesn't play all the time, but when he does start, I like to slot him in because I know he's capable of getting a couple of hits. Granted, he hasn't had as good of a season, but once again, sometimes I do like to throw away the catcher position to kind of sacrifice and get some other guys into my lineup.
Yeah, that's one thing I will say as a disclaimer. I wouldn't fret upon, stressing over who you have at the catcher position because, I mean, every now and then, I mean, you can pick and pluck a guy. Even in this town, a guy like Jason Knapp. And for the Phillies, if you hit the right spot for Jason Knapp, it costs you $2,200. Next thing you know, he's giving you a home run. He's giving you 20 points in DraftKings. It's like, whoa, what just happened? So, listen, value is the name of the game. You got to find the value on these slates. You really do. And last 2 guys I'll talk about before we move on real fast, before we get out of here. Gavin Lux, to me, I know we talk Dodgers, and I know, like you said, you're looking at the big bats and Justin Turner and Mookie Betts. And again, these are just guys that are below 3,000, or I would say, number one value guys are below 4,000, but this is a guy below 3,000 that I think you really can give you some positive efficiency today because I think there could be multiple hits in this game. Gavin Lux, listen, he's only hitting 233. I get it. He's $2,800, right? $2,800, only 1-0 out of the last 5 games when we talk about fantasy points. I know he does strike out a ton, right? 6 strikeouts in 5 games. That's almost more than 1 per game. So I know it does happen, but I just think this could be a 6-5 kind of game, or maybe like a 7-3 kind of game. And I think that could obviously give some opportunities to a guy like Gavin Lux. And the other guy I'll say is Dylan Carlson, who I've been high on, and again, high on as a reserve standpoint. I like the matchup against the Cubs, against Zach Davies. I think Carlson does a lot in that St. Louis lineup. And for 3,800, I think he's another guy that you can look at that's going to give you, I say it all the time, positive point production. Okay, he's going to give you opportunities to produce. So I like where he's at in that lineup as well.
The one guy I went with today, and a lot of it's because of his history against Davies in that lineup, and he may not even be in the lineup, is Matt Carpenter. Matt Carpenter, 12 of 26, 3 home runs against Davies. I think he faced off against him, had a couple of hits earlier this season, and the first time these two met. And he may not be in the lineup, so I may have to pivot from him. But if Matt Carpenter's playing, I'm playing Matt Carpenter, even though he stinks today.
Listen, you know what's funny? Matt Carpenter used to be a household name. I mean, it was like, yo, this guy, multi-position eligible, first base, third base, second base, right? He was all over the field. You know, from a season-long standpoint, he was tremendous because you could pick and pluck him in so many different lineups every week. And then he kind of just fell off the map. Like all of a sudden, like the Monstars from Space Jam came up in baseball and just took all his talent. Like he just hasn't been that good. But you bring up the numbers, and this is what separates guys like yourself from the rest of the field, because you do the research, you get the analytical data, and if you can zone in on a guy or two like that, low ownership, low value, you're going to win and you're going to cash, and that's the most important part. Now, before we get out of here, FFVP in the late game, before we just throw up a real quick image of the home run derby, I'm all in. I'm all in right here. Matt, I'm excited about my FFVP for the late game and David Fletcher. And again, I love taking these guys. I do. And the reason why is because I scoop them up, I look at them, and I feel like, you know, I coach youth soccer, and my kids now, I've coached them from 8 years old. They're now 14, and it's been great to watch them blossom and grow. And I feel like that from an FFVP standpoint, because like I said, we pick these guys that nobody really looks at, nobody hears of, and if they produce and you start to see them a week later, they can't even be a FFVP because they've been that productive. It's like we've actually opened them up to the world, right? So David Fletcher, listen, just look at his numbers. Just look at his numbers. And here's what I will say, Matt. I don't understand, and maybe you have an explanation for this. I don't. So I look at a guy, and I'll just go back. Quick 5-game breakdown. Started at 3,400, gets you 7 points. Then he drops 300, gets you 8. Then they bump him up 300, gets you 20. And then he gets 20 for 3,100, a -3 drop. And now they drop him 400. They drop him another 300 to 2,800 after a 20-point performance. I don't understand. So these are the things I look at. The guy's batting 302, right? He look at his hits. 3-2, 4-2, multi-hit games. He was just 4 for 4 2 games ago. So for me, FFVP, David Fletcher, he will be in one of my lineups today.
I had Fletcher in my lineup yesterday. He had great numbers against Gonzalez in his career, and of course, he paid that off. So I know who you're talking about here, and he's a guy, let's just say this. I have a really packed outfield right now in terms of high price guys. If Matt Carpenter's not in, I'm putting Fletcher in. I'm going to roll that money over to first base, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, Fletcher's definitely on my radar, and his pricing is certainly well worth it right now.
Yeah, listen, like you said, you gotta you pack that power punch inside a lot. You have to look for those Fletcher kind of guys. You have to look for them, and it's the difference from winning or losing. It really is. So I hope everybody gets some money today. I really do. I hope some of these plays come out and we're successful. Now, last thing I want to say, I'm going to throw this up on the screen because I know me and Matt's not a huge home run derby guy. I'm a huge home run derby guy. But one thing's for sure, we're both going to look at it, and we're both going to try to see, have some fun, see who's going to win, right? And I've seen a lot of national perspectives out there of the whole Ohtani versus Gallo in the finals, and a lot of people picking Joey Gallo to win this one. Rightfully so. Left-handed hitter in Coors Field. We know the ball's going to go out of there, right? Now, what I will say, Matt, is you have a couple Cinderella stories here. Obviously, I think the best one is Trey Mancini. Fights cancer, comes back. Having a great year, in terms of comeback play for the Baltimore Orioles. It would be nice to see him not only produce, but win. I don't think that'll happen, but I like the hometown boy. I think everybody's looking over Trevor Story, and Trevor Story knows that park. And I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, but I think it's a lot easier to hit a home run to the left side of the field than it is the right side of the field. Maybe a guy like Larry Walker may disagree with me back in the day, but what I will say is I'll go with the Vinny Castilla kind of pick, and I'm going to go with Trevor Story, a guy that's probably going to be playing in a different uniform 2 weeks from now. I don't know about you. What do you think about this breakdown for the home run derby?
So I think that I don't know if there's necessarily value in any of sort of the matchups or the people because it is kind of a crapshoot. I mean, there's no value in taking Ohtani right now. I just,
No.
if you want to bet Ohtani, you go and you find some props to do it.
Yep.
Maybe longest home run, things like that. So there's no value on him. The rest of the event, like to me, I feel like I'm going to find more value in probably taking how many home runs, maybe like an over on the first round. Because I think that the first round's going to see a ton. You get everybody fresh, everybody's ready. It's Coors Field. So I think if there's a prop that comes out like, hey, over under 50 home runs or whatever it is in the first round. I know it's gonna be higher than 50. Longest home run. I think I saw it was like 512 feet. I think that I might go with the over there with some of these guys because I think that they're gonna juice the numbers a little bit to help everybody. Like, hey, did you see this guy hit a 520-foot home run? So I think a lot of the value is gone for something like that. I would have taken Soto, but Soto's going up against Ohtani. So to me, there's no value there. Mancini's a great story, as you said. So to me, I'm not going to necessarily touch the individual guys. I'm going to try and find some props on the side where the value is in this event.
I like that. I like that. And for everybody listening, that's the thing. There's a ton of props that are going to be, if you want to do some prop betting and have some fun for the home run derby, listen, from longest home run, like Matt said, from, matchup to matchup, from, whatever plus money you can find, in the winning. So, in the winning bracket, it's there. It just depends on what you like. Honestly, I'm going to be honest, certain times people have asked me this, even though I love the whole DFS aspect. I love the art of sports betting and prop betting, but there's certain events I don't even bet on. I didn't play one NBA showdown lineup for the NBA finals, so far because I just want to watch the game. There's some times where I just got to take my hat off as a fantasy guy and as a sports betting guy and say, I just want to watch the game. Because sometimes I get too enamored in my phone and I'm looking at updates and I don't really watch the game because I'm a game lover. I do. I love to break down the actual game as well. So the home run derby for me, I'm not betting at all. What I'm doing is I'm just sitting there and I'm watching it. I hope I see a lot of kids from the players, players' sons and daughters walking up, being their bat boys and giving them their Gatorade and their towel and seeing the pictures and the nostalgia factor of it because I'm a big baseball guy and, national pastime for real. So I'm looking a lot forward to seeing who wins this. I hope it's Trevor Story because it'll be a great story. I hope it's Trey Mancini for the simple fact of what we talked about, but I think it's going to be one of those big guns. I really do. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I guarantee you, one thing I will say, Matt, I think Joey Gallo will give you the longest home run. It's not going to be Shohei Ohtani. I think Joey Gallo hits, I would say, a 530 plus foot shot in Coors Field. I kind of like that. We'll see what the props are for that.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, and you can get some value. Everybody's going to bet on Ohtani. If you do want to fade Ohtani, you can certainly find the value in places because I'm betting, Monday, all the money's going to come in on him.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I don't think and you know what? Rightfully so. It should. I mean, we've been there before. He's leading the league in home runs. It's almost automatic. One thing's for sure. It's going to be fun. It is. And I just hope. And I can't remember. I know, Matt, before we went on air, what was it, 98 was the last time it was in Coors Field, you were saying?
Yeah, 98 was the last time it was in Coors Field.
So, the home run total was low. It was in the 80s, right, you were saying? So, I mean, you just never know, right? You never know. I mean, who would have thought that Bobby Abreu would have won a home run derby, right? In Detroit. I mean, no, you just don't know where these guys are going to come out. So I'm just looking forward to it as well as an event. So, and good luck to everybody that's putting some prop money on. But listen, as always, I want to thank everybody for tuning in like you guys have done. Keep hitting us up in the comments. Again, at Cutillo23, at Mid-Major Matt. And Matt said a lot of tremendous things. Please. And Matt, do me a favor. When you see, and I know we're both good for this, one of the guys you talked about today, when they hit, man, please tag me up, post it so we can get that credibility out there because I don't think a lot of people understand how much work goes into what we do, especially you. You do tremendous work. And I want to thank you for being on with me today, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, as I said, I don't get up early for too many people. You are certainly one of these guys, especially since you're one of the best at DFS.
I try, man. I appreciate that, but your stats are second to none. Again, what you got anything coming up, Matt? At Mid Major Matt, obviously give him a follow. But you got anything coming up in the woodworks?
Yeah, we're working on our college football win total series. I write for Athlon, and every year I write an article on every team in college football, give my opinion on the win totals in the NFL as well. And that series is going to start next week with the Big 12.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And guys, check it out. Athlon Sports is a tremendous site. Tons of great articles and writers through that. So make sure you're following my man at Mid Major Matt. Number one for his K-Props of research, but for these articles. And I can't wait to see that, because I have a guy I actually have a meeting with in the next couple weeks. He's a Penn State guy looking to come on the Heat Racial Network to do a specific NCAA football show. And I know my boy Mark Drumheller does a great football show on Saturdays as well. So I'm going to have to get you with those guys, Matt. Maybe you guys can mix it up, because I know you'll offer some tremendous value to that as well.
Anything I can do to help out you in this wonderful site, I'll certainly do so.
I appreciate it, man. Big things coming up, Matt. I can tell you that. Let everybody know. Win Daily Sports. Give us a follow at Win Daily Sports. Also at the Sharp app. Check it out. I'm going to give you a little teaser. We're going to have a show. Me, Mark Drumheller, and our boy Mlb Dfs Ghost. It's going to be called Plus Action Money. It's going to be a pop-up show. You never know where we're going to show up. And we're just going to pick one game. It could be a NBA Finals game. It could be an NFL Sunday night game. Could be a Sunday night MLB game. And we're just going to talk about plus money props and plus money bets for that specific game. So a lot of good things coming up. But as always, at Mid Major Matt, at Cutillo 23. Give us all a follow. Everybody have a tremendous weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning.